Greetings everyone, and welcome back to more of my hopes for Season 5 and beyond. In my last two videos on this topic, I touched on a character that has only been briefly mentioned in the series but never shown. Basically, I was trying to touch on some hidden, untapped potential that I've noticed in the series. For this video, I would like to talk about a missed opportunity that I really hope the MLP staff will go back over at some point. During the Season 4 finale, we were given an interesting and even menacing new villain, some excellent character growth for an old villain, a completely new setup for the main six in future seasons, as well as a number of new questions on what direction the show will take from here. However, I feel there is something that this finale missed out on, something that I'd honestly like to see the MLP staff attempt at some point: dealing with loss. I can remember hearing that A Bird in the Hoof back in Season 1 was originally supposed to be about Fluttershy coping with the death of one of her pets. I don't know exactly why the writers decided to do something different, but I'm quite curious to see how MLP could introduce such a topic. Now, talking about death in a children's show must be handled with great care, and I don't know whether the MLP staff will ever try introducing that story element. However, there is a way to talk about loss without going so far as to include the death of a character or pet. When I first saw T-Rex destroy Twilight's home, I was stunned. That library had been part of the show since the very first episode, and so many of Twilight's stories have taken place there. The tree's destruction led into a very satisfying fight scene between Twilight and T-Rex. But the fact that no one made any mention of Twilight's loss throughout the rest of the episode feels like the MLP staff missed out on a fantastic teaching opportunity. Now, I wouldn't say that they should have changed the finale to include such themes. More than likely, the episode would have been overcrowded with plot elements if they focused part of the story on Twilight's loss as well. But now that they're moving on to Season 5, I would honestly love to see one whole episode dedicated to Twilight moving on after this tragedy. She would have been caught up in all the joy of restoring Equestria right after T-Rex's downfall, but sooner or later, reality is going to catch up with her, and she's going to begin feeling the effects of all that she's lost. Or at least, I sincerely hope the writers dedicated an episode to that idea. I can imagine that Twilight would start collecting the scattered remains of her books that had fallen all over Ponyville. And even though many of them would contain rather trivial stories and information, with other copies easily found elsewhere in Equestria, for Twilight, they would have fond memories attached to each of them, and she would feel all the more heartbroken with every tattered and burned book she recovers. Until she comes across one of her more ancient tomes, like the book she received from Princess Celestia that contains Star Swirl's unfinished spell. Her despair would quickly turn into panic as she realizes that there are no other copies of this book. Through painstaking work, she begins to frantically try remembering all the words that were contained in her burned books. Night after night, doing her utmost to preserve her memories as best she can. Of course, her friends would try to help her to the best of their abilities, realizing just how important these books were to her. But after a while, Twilight's obsessiveness starts to reach Lesson 0 levels, as she refuses to let go of anything she can possibly save from her old life. The rest of the main six each try to reason with her in their own ways, but still feeling sorry for her loss and unwilling to force Twilight on getting back to her normal life. And it is in this moment that Spike steps in. Much like with Lesson 0, he has ways of reaching out to Twilight in the middle of her obsessiveness. But he is also able to provide a very unique perspective on this situation, because he too had lost a great deal when T-Rex destroyed their home. He was there with Twilight each and every day. And though Spike doesn't have the same feelings about books like Twilight does, he too has had to deal with feelings of despair over his precious things. And thus, both Twilight and Spike could be learning a lesson about moving on despite tragic circumstances, realizing that what they still have is far more important, and that right now the best thing they can do is build towards a new future while working together. That is the kind of lesson I'd like to see from MLP. Even if the writers don't want to introduce the concept of death into the show, there is a marvelous teaching opportunity with what they've already set up. If any of the staff ever comes across this video, I sincerely hope they will take this idea to heart. And if, by chance, they're already working on creating such an episode, then I eagerly await seeing it. In fact, I hope there could also be a bit of a happy ending in the final scene of that story, where Twilight comes across a gem in the ground and Spike is overjoyed to see it. Twilight is a little puzzled as to why something like this would hold such high importance to Spike. And I can imagine that Spike would be appreciative, but not really willing to tell anyone why it is so valuable to him. After all, precious things often come attached with precious memories. What do you think? I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.